Imagine you're sitting in your house and the weather report says a massive, devastating hurricane is coming straight for you.
Right, so you're probably terrified, boarding up the windows, bracing for the worst.
Exactly. You hunker down, you prepare for total destruction, but then the storm passes, you step outside, and you realize the hurricane didn't destroy your house. It actually, watered all your crops and somehow built you a brand new barn.
Which is a completely wild scenario, but it perfectly captures the reality of what we're looking at today.
It really does. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are taking the dominant, incredibly anxiety-inducing narrative around artificial intelligence, the idea that it's this ultimate job killer coming to just hollow out employment and leave you behind, and we are flipping that completely on its head.
Yeah, because the actual data we're seeing in the labor market tells a fundamentally different story.
A completely different story. We have a massive stack of recent organizational research in front of us. Our whole mission today is to dig into this synthesis by Jonathan H. Westover. He analyzed the incredibly comprehensive PwC 2026 Global AI Jobs Barometer.
Which is just a gold mine of data.
It really is, and we're pairing that with numbers from McKinsey, MIT, and some really fascinating corporate case studies. So the central premise we want you to walk away with today is this. The organizations adopting AI the most aggressively aren't firing people. They're actually expanding their headcount, they're raising wages significantly, and they're completely elevating what it means to have a job.
I mean, the deeply counterintuitive reality. People's fears are totally valid given the history of automation, but to understand this raising all boats scenario, we have to look at the organizational economics.
Right.
We need to figure out not just what is happening with these surprising numbers, but why it's happening and how leading companies are actually pulling it off.
Yeah, so to get to that how, we have to start with the raw numbers. Because if I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, sure, that sounds like optimistic corporate PR. We need to prove this is a measurable economic reality. So let's talk about the productivity numbers from that PwC 2026 data.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So firms with high AI exposure, meaning they've really integrated AI deeply into their workflows, they are showing 40% higher productivity growth overall compared to companies that are barely using it.
A 40% jump. I mean, 40% across the board is insane. That alters the GDP of a country.
It really does. But it actually gets crazier. When you isolate the top quintile of adopters, so the top 20% of organizations that have truly embedded this tech into their DNA, they're seeing a 163% gain in productivity.
Wait, 163%?
Yeah, exactly. 163.
So a team of 10 people is suddenly producing the output of like 26 people?
Essentially, yes. It redefines what a company can output. And the wild part is, instead of taking those massive gains and laying off half the staff, these top-tier organizations are actually hiring faster than their peers.
Which makes no sense to the traditional corporate mindset.
Right. And on top of hiring faster, wages for what the research calls professionalized AI-exposed roles have increased 42% faster since 2021.
42% faster wage growth. That is a massive premium. But I want to clarify something for everyone listening. Not every company is seeing a 163% boost and handing out huge raises today, right?
Oh, definitely not. If you look at McKinsey's 2023 data, they noted that while about 55% of organizations were playing around with AI, only 10 to 15% had deeply embedded it.
Right, so most companies are just having their interns use it to write emails.
Exactly. They haven't changed their core operating models at all. The massive gains are isolated to that top tier.
Okay, but I have to push back here, because if I'm a CEO and my company is suddenly 163% more productive, traditional, ruthless corporate logic says I can produce the exact same amount of stuff with less than half the staff.
The classic cost-cutting playbook.
Exactly. I fire everyone, pocket the savings, my profit margins look incredible for the earnings call, and I get a huge bonus. Why on earth are these companies choosing to hire more people instead of just taking the cash?
It's a great question. It defies that short-term defensive logic. But to understand it, we have to look at the three economic forces of new technology, which draws heavily on frameworks from labor economist David Otter.
Okay, let's break this down.
Right, so force number one is the one everybody knows, the substitution effect.
This is the robot taking my job effect.
Precisely. AI directly replacing human labor on routine tasks. If you just do basic data entry and AI does it instantly, demand for your specific task drops. If this was the only effect, the doomsday narrative would be totally right.
But it's not the only effect. There's a second force.
Yes, the productivity effect. This is where the story shifts. Going back to your CEO hypothetical, Yes, you could keep producing the exact same amount with half the staff.
Right.
But in a competitive market, if you are that much more efficient, your internal costs plummet. You can lower the price of your product. And when prices drop, consumer demand skyrockets.
Oh, I see. So you don't want to stay the same size.
Exactly. You want to capture market share. To meet that explosive new demand, you have to scale up your logistics, your customer support, your operations. So your overall demand for human labor actually increases.
Okay, so it's a growth mindset instead of a defensive one. But wait, if the AI is doing all the work, why do you need more humans? Which I guess brings us to Otter's third
It's
force.
the complementarity effect.
And this always reminds me of the whole ATM analogy from the 70s, right?
Oh, that's the perfect historical parallel.
Yeah, because when ATMs came out, everyone panicked and thought human bank tellers were completely doomed. Like, why hire a human to hand out cash when the machine does it for free on the side of the building?
But the exact opposite happened.
Right, because the ATM made it so cheap to run a branch, banks opened way more branches. So they ended up hiring even more tellers.
And crucially, the teller's job changed. The ATM complemented them. It handled the basic cash sorting, which freed up the human teller to do high-value relationship banking, selling mortgages, advising on loans, opening credit cards.
It is exactly what we're seeing with AI right now.
Exactly. AI doesn't just do old things faster, it creates entirely new, high-value tasks that require human judgment and creativity. So in these successful early to mid stages of AI adoption, the productivity and complementarity effects are vastly outweighing the substitution effect.
Okay, so if this complementarity effect is creating all these new high-value human tasks, we really need to look at what an AI-augmented job actually looks like on a Tuesday morning. Because if the machine does the grunt work, what does a brand new entry-level job even mean anymore?
This is where it gets really fascinating. The PwC research uses this term called the seniorization of work.
The seniorization of work.
Right. They found a seven-fold increase in senior skill requirements for jobs that used to be strictly entry-level.
A 7 times increase. Wait, so you're skipping the corporate mailroom entirely?
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Think about how people usually start their careers. For generations, you pay your dues by doing routine administrative work,
Yeah.
right? Formatting reports, gathering historical data, doing baseline coding.
Right, you learn the business by doing the boring heavy lifting.
But today, generative AI handles all of that instantly. So the human skills that are in demand, the ones showing up 2.5 times more frequently in AI-exposed job descriptions, are things like complex judgment, empathy, and creativity.
Because the machine can pull the financial history of 10,000 clients in 2 seconds, but it can't sit across a desk and, read a client's body language to understand why they're terrified of retiring.
Exactly. The human value is now entirely about navigating ambiguity. And there's a brilliant 2023 study by Brynjolfsson and his team that shows exactly how this plays out in real time.
Oh, right, the customer service study, which is the perfect test lab because customer service is so high stress and ruthlessly tracked with metrics.
It's a perfect environment for data.
Yeah.
So they looked at the rollout of a generative AI assistant in a massive tech support chat environment.
How did it actually work for the employee?
Before AI, a worker would get a complex problem from a customer, and they'd have to frantically search through ancient internal databases, read old tickets, and manually type out a response while the customer is getting mad.
Which is incredibly stressful.
Totally. But with the AI, the tool was embedded right in the chat. So as the customer typed, the AI listened and instantly suggested fully formed, highly accurate technical responses. The human just had to review it, adjust the tone, and hit send.
So it's like having a hyper-competent co-pilot whispering the answer in your ear?
Exactly. And overall, it bumped worker productivity by 14%. Issues resolved faster, fewer escalations. But the really mind-blowing part was who actually got the biggest boost.
You would assume it's the 10-year veterans, right? The people who already know the system.
That's what everyone thought. But the data showed the exact opposite. The AI disproportionately helped the newest, least experienced workers. It basically boosted novices to the performance level of their senior colleagues almost immediately.
Wow. Wait, really?
Yeah. Think about the mechanics. A veteran spent years memorizing the weird glitches in the system. The AI absorbed all that collective veteran knowledge and just handed it to the new guy on his first day.
That's incredible. It completely deletes the painful 6-month learning curve where you're just constantly failing and getting yelled at by customers.
Right. And the study noted that retention and job satisfaction for these new workers shot up.
Hmm?
They feel successful and empowered from day one.
But, okay, I have to stop here because there's a huge flip side to this.
Yeah.
If I'm listening to this and I'm a college student or I'm trying to pivot from a totally different industry, this sounds terrifying.
How so?
Well, if the entry-level floor is no longer willing to do data entry and is suddenly must possess advanced ethical reasoning and high-level empathy, isn't that a massive barrier to entry? You can't just take a multiple-choice test to prove you have complex judgment.
You're hitting on the dual-edged sword of seniorization. It offers rapid progression, but it absolutely risks exacerbating inequality for people without that advanced training or education.
Yeah, how do you even get your foot in the door?
Exactly. And beyond the new workers, there's a massive psychological stake for the existing workforce. Think about the technical wizard whose entire identity is tied to procedural mastery.
Right, like the guy who is the absolute undisputed king of complex Excel macros in the office.
Exactly. If the AI suddenly writes flawless code or builds that financial model in 3 seconds, the company looks at that technical wizard and says, great, the machine did the math. Now we need you to be an empathetic communicator and explain this to the board.
Oh man, that guy might have a total identity crisis.
He absolutely will. Even if his job is safe and he gets a raise, his self-worth was based on being the fastest technical operator in the room. Being told to suddenly become a relationship builder feels like a demotion in status, psychologically speaking.
Which brings us to a huge point. Because this shift is so jarring, a company can't just drop this software on people's desks, send an email, and walk away.
Absolutely not. The way a company communicates this transition is the literal difference between getting that 163% productivity boost or sparking a full-blown employee revolt.
Yeah, and the failure rate for this stuff is really high, right?
It's staggering. Researchers Rock and Wachter estimated that only 20 to 30% of AI projects actually scale successfully from a pilot program into real deployment.
So 70 to 80% of the time, corporations are just completely failing at this.
Yes, they die in the proof of concept phase. And it's rarely because the algorithm is bad. It's because of organizational failures. It's about culture, decentralized authority, and change management. It's a human problem.
So how does a company actually get it right?
Let's look at Unilever. Their approach to AI in recruitment is a masterclass in this. They wanted to use AI to screen the massive mountain of resumes they get every day.
Which, if you're a human recruiter at Unilever, you immediately think, okay, the algorithm is learning to read resumes today, and next year it's doing the interviews, and I am unemployed.
Exactly. The fear is instant. But Unilever didn't just deploy it in secret. They sat the recruiters down and explicitly communicated the strategy. They said, this tool is not replacing your judgment. It's here to reduce human bias and expand our candidate pool.
But corporate communications always say stuff like that. How did they prove it?
They showed them the data. They proved how the AI, taking over the grueling task of reading 10,000 resumes, gave the recruiters hours back in their day to actually talk to top-tier candidates.
So they demonstrated the complementarity effect in real life.
Exactly. But the genius part, which ties into research by Raish and Krakowski, was the user interface itself. They built in feedback loops and something called algorithmic contestability.
Algorithmic contestability. Let's really unpack that, because that concept is huge for anyone using these tools.
It means the human worker has the structural right and the software button to challenge the AI's decision.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if the AI rejected a resume, but the human recruiter felt this candidate had a really unique background, the recruiter could click a button to override the AI.
So they can say, no, the machine missed the nuance here.
Right. And when they hit that button, a data scientist reviews it, and the AI's model gets updated. The human is actively retraining the machine.
Psychologically, that flips the whole dynamic. The AI isn't your boss dictating terms. It's a tool that you are supervising and managing.
It empowers the worker completely. Another great example of this kind of proactive management is AT&T. They realized a few years ago their workforce was facing a massive skills gap due to technological shifts.
And the easy corporate move there is to just fire 50,000 people and hire 50,000 new people.
Right. But instead, they committed to retraining over 100,000 of their existing employees. They built these radically transparent career pathways. Every worker got a detailed skill assessment showing exactly where they were and exactly what they needed to learn to get the new AI-augmented roles.
That's amazing. Usually an HR skill assessment is just a secret file used to justify your severance package.
Exactly. But AT&T put the map on the table, and former CEO Jeannie Rometty pointed out something crucial. They involved the union representatives from the very beginning. They didn't just mandate this top-down. They designed the transition with the workers.
Which is so important because if I hear my company say AI will create exciting new opportunities for you, my immediate cynical thought is, yeah, right before you offshore my department. How do you actually defeat that corporate skepticism?
You have to look at procedural justice theory. This was conceptualized by Gerald Leventhal. The core idea is that people's acceptance of a disruptive outcome doesn't just depend on the outcome itself. It depends on whether the process was fair, transparent, and inclusive.
So it's really about how the sausage is made.
Exactly. Researcher Enid Mumford called this participatory design. You don't have executives sit in a closed boardroom, buy some AI software, and force it on the frontline workers. You ask the workers on day one, what is the most annoying, repetitive bottleneck in your day? Let's build a tool to automate that specific thing.
And when you do that, the workers actually want the AI because they helped build it to solve their own headache.
Right. Companies like Microsoft even have formal AI ethics review boards with direct employee representation. When workers know there's a formal way to raise concerns, they view the tech as safe.
Okay, so trust is the foundation. You have to have trust. But once you have it and the workers aren't trying to sabotage the new tech, the company actually has to train them for these crazy new elevated expectations.
Yeah, the capability building is the house you build on that foundation of trust. And you can't just expect people to naturally possess complex ethical judgment. It has to be cultivated. Researchers Boudreau and Ramstad talk about moving away from rigid job descriptions and building dynamic workforce architectures.
Okay, dynamic workforce architectures. That sounds like intense corporate jargon. What does that actually look like for me, the employee?
Think about Hollywood. When you work on a movie, you aren't an employee of the studio forever. You're, say, a lighting director. You get pulled onto a 3-month project because they need your specific skill. When the movie is done, you move to another project based on what you can do, not a rigid job title.
Oh, I see. So instead of me being marketing associate level 2, sitting at the same desk doing the same 15 bullet points for 5 years, I'm fluid.
Exactly. Organizations are shifting to internal talent marketplaces. If you develop great algorithmic literacy, you might spend 3 months advising the finance team and then jump over to logistics to help them design a new workflow.
That sounds incredibly engaging, honestly. And the scale of investment to make this work is staggering. Look at Amazon. Even before the current AI boom, they had that career choice program where they prepay 95% of tuition for employees.
Yeah, even for degrees totally unrelated to Amazon's business.
Right. And recently, they pledged to provide free AI training to 29 million people globally by 2025.
They know that capability development has to be systemic. But here's the catch. You can't take a highly trained, fluid, AI-augmented worker and plug them back into a bureaucratic, sluggish 1990s management structure.
Right. The operating model itself has to change.
Exactly. And DBS Bank in Singapore is the quintessential example of this. When they brought in AI, they didn't just automate back-office data entry. They completely rebuilt their entire operating model around the customer journey.
Let's look at the mechanics of what DBS actually did, because traditionally a bank is incredibly siloed.
Highly siloed. IT is on one floor, customer service is on another, compliance is down the hall. A relationship manager trying to approve a client's loan would have to manually gather data from 5 different systems and wait days for approvals.
But DBS realized that if the AI can do all that data gathering and risk assessment instantly, those silos are just getting in the way.
Exactly. So they smashed the silos, they created cross-functional teams, they put app designers, technologists, and financial specialists at the same table working on the same problem.
And for the relationship managers, their daily life completely changed. They weren't spending 60% of their week chasing paperwork anymore. The AI gave them real-time, synthesized insights.
So they were elevated to high-level strategic advisors. They basically became financial therapists for their clients.
Focusing entirely on the human element. And DBS became one of the best-performing banks in the world while expanding employment.
It's the perfect execution of the productivity and complementarity effects.
But, okay, I have to bring up a very practical roadblock for anyone listening to this. We can talk about cross-functional teams and dynamic architectures all day, but what about the time dilemma?
Ah, yes.
Time. Because if I'm a worker and I'm already at 100% capacity, putting in 50 hours a week just to survive my current workload, when exactly am I supposed to be learning algorithmic literacy? Does the company expect me to do it on Sunday afternoons? because that's a one-way ticket to severe burnout.
You've hit on the most overlooked dimension of this entire macroeconomic shift. David Garvin, a researcher on learning organizations, made it very clear, without protected time, development is just corporate lip service.
We value your growth. Here's a mandatory 4-hour AI module. Have it done by Friday, but don't drop any of your actual client work.
Exactly. It's a symbolic gesture. Organizations that are actually serious about this have to create structurally protected temporal space.
Meaning they have to pay you to learn.
They have to actively reduce your operational workload to make room for it. Dedicated development rotations, paid learning time, integrated into your week, and just as importantly, they have to create psychological safety.
Right, Amy Edmondson's work at Harvard.
Yes. Leaders have to frame AI integration as a collective learning journey where mistakes are actually expected. If an employee tries to build an AI workflow and it fails, but they learn from it, that has to be celebrated. If they're terrified a failed experiment will ruin their annual review, they just won't experiment.
And then the company never gets that huge productivity boost.
Exactly. But the beautiful irony here is that AI can actually help solve the training bottleneck it created.
Oh, like the AI tutoring system.
Yes, AI-powered simulation environments. It's basically a flight simulator for an office job.
I love this concept because a pilot doesn't learn how to handle an engine failure on a real plane full of passengers. They learn in a simulator where crashing is fine.
Right, so now a worker can practice a high-stakes client negotiation with an AI persona. They can totally fail, get immediate feedback on where their empathy fell short, and try again instantly. Consequence-free practice.
That is going to accelerate capability building so fast. But I want to be totally honest with the listeners here. Even with flight simulators and dynamic architectures, the reality is that some specific jobs are just going to disappear completely.
They absolutely will. There are daily tasks happening right now that will not exist in 5 years.
So how does a company handle that? If a company claims to be doing employment expanding AI, what happens to the person whose specific task is permanently erased?
Individual displacement is a real trauma, even if aggregate employment goes up. The best organizations handle this through aggressive internal redeployment. And Capelli and Keller's research shows this isn't charity. It is significantly more cost-effective to retrain and move an existing employee than to lay them off, pay severance, ruin morale, and then spend months trying to hire externally.
Because you get to keep the institutional knowledge.
Exactly. Look at NTUC Income, a health insurer in Singapore. They brought in a highly advanced AI to process insurance claims.
Which, if you're a claims processor, sounds like a death sentence for your career. The machine literally does your exact job title.
Right. But NTUC didn't fire them. They looked ahead and saw their customer advisory division needed massive expansion to capture new market share.
So they transitioned the claims processors.
Yes. They kept their salaries, gave them mentors, and moved them into customer advisory roles.
Which is brilliant, because who knows the complex nuances of an insurance policy better than the person who spent 10 years processing the claims?
Exactly. They paired that deep, latent institutional knowledge with human empathy. The AI processed the claims instantly, the customers got expert advice, and the workers kept their jobs. Massive win on all fronts.
It's the ultimate model for handling displacement. But if we zoom out from these company case studies to the macro level, there's some really severe systemic risks here that we have to talk about.
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
For one, algorithmic bias, which Barocas and Selbst have researched deeply.
Right, because if an AI is deciding who gets internally promoted, it's learning from historical data.
And if historically a company only promoted men from Ivy League schools, the algorithm will learn that pattern and silently filter out amazing, diverse candidates at a massive scale.
It just hard codes past discrimination into the future.
Exactly, which is why algorithmic auditing and contestability are so vital. But there's also a geographic risk. Siemens and Raj have tracked how AI adoption clusters in places that already have tech talent and venture capital like Silicon Valley or Seattle.
Yeah, so if I'm listening to this in a rural town or a place outside a tech hub, I'm probably thinking this AI boom is going to totally bypass my community, even if national GDP goes up.
And if we rely strictly on market forces, that regional inequality will absolutely worsen. We need intentional, inclusive growth frameworks. But David Otter points out a really powerful technological silver lining here.
Remote work capabilities combining with AI.
Exactly. For the first time, highly complex, high-value work doesn't require you to physically sit in a skyscraper in a major city. Real-time translation, AI collaboration tools companies can actively choose to source their expanding talent pools from geographically isolated areas.
The technology gives us the ability to distribute the wealth, but leadership has to consciously make that strategic choice.
And that imperative extends to how the wealth is distributed within the company, too. If a company gets that 163% productivity boost and all the money goes to executive bonuses while frontline wages stagnate, you will destroy morale.
Right. True inclusive growth means profit sharing, equity, or productivity-linked wage increases. Capital can't just capture all the gains of a human AI collaboration.
Because the human judgment and empathy are what actually generate the value. Which really brings us to the core of this whole deep dive. Organizations face a fundamental existential choice right now.
Yeah.
They can view AI defensively as a tool to just cut headcount. They might get a short-term stock bump, but they'll end up with a paralyzed, checked-out workforce.
They'll just shrink into irrelevance. Or they can treat it strategically, like the PwC data proves. A capability amplifier that expands employment and pushes human potential to new heights.
The organizations that invest in dynamic architectures and psychological safety are the ones that will dominate the global economy.
So if you or your leaders are just looking to trim the fat, you're playing a losing game. You have to use AI to make your people infinitely more capable. It's an incredibly hopeful narrative backed by hard data. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought to mull over. We've seen that AI is forcing entry-level roles to demand senior-level skills from day one. But if a 22-year-old on their first day is doing what a 10-year veteran used to do, what exactly will it mean to be a senior expert 10 years from now? As AI keeps relentlessly raising the floor, what does the new ceiling of human potential actually look like?
That really is the defining question of our generation.
Something to think about during your commute. Keep questioning the consensus, keep digging deep into your own sources, and we'll see you next time.